1980's Scared to Death is a movie that I've kind of inadvertently ended up covering. Last year, a regular viewer recommended checking out a film called Cine because they said it would suit the tone of this channel down to the ground. So, I looked it up and found that it was actually kinda sorta loosely connected to today's movie. And what I mean by that is that Cine basically wanted to be a sequel to Scared to Death, but because Scared to Death at the time was so obscure and low budget, they didn't want to run the risk of ostracising potential audiences by tying it to a forgotten movie made 10 years prior that was out of circulation. As such, I kind of felt like it made sense to cover Scared to Death before Cine because, while they're largely unconnected, I am nothing if not a bit of a completionist, and I like to try and do these things properly. So, Scared to Death, a movie that damn near bankrupt director and writer William Malone. I'm not kidding, the film cost $74,000 to produce and he ended up selling everything he owned, including his car, to get it made. So, with so much on the line, you'd think that this had to be something incredible, right? Well, Scared to Death follows the misadventures of Ted, and as the film opens, Ted's just quit his job as a detective to pursue a career in writing, with maybe a little freelance detective work on the down low. As he's leaving the station, however, he backs out into the car of a lady called Jennifer. Ted tries to leave the scene, but Jennifer is adamant he needs to stay because the cars are vintage, and she wants the police to document the hit. After some backing and forthing that gets a bit surreal, Ted gives Jennifer a business card with his new office address and phone number and tells her to reach out to him there. Which she does. She says there's at least $1,200 of damages to a car, and without missing a beat, Ted heads into a back room and returns with an envelope containing $2,000, which he tells her to keep. This changes the tone of the relationship immediately, and the pair soon warm to each other. Ted even goes so far as to ask Jennifer out, which she politely declines but is flattered all the same. And it's while this is going on that the main thrust of the film begins to take shape, as a mysterious person or being has been stalking the streets of LA, attacking anyone it can find, leaving them either dead or comatose. At the time we join the film, we see the creature claim its 10th and 11th victims in relatively quick succession, with the police currently hot on the case. Overseeing this is a chap called Lou, who's good friends with Ted, and over a game of chess, the pair briefly discuss the case before Lou has to head back to work. We then pick back up with Jennifer, returning home from the grocery store. When she arrives at her house, Ted appears to have left her a handwritten note apologising once again for the incident, and leaves her a big bunch of flowers. Jennifer's charmed and heads back over to Ted's place to leave a note of her own saying that she's reconsidered Ted's offer and would love to go for dinner sometime. Which they do. Later that evening, Jennifer arrives at Ted's office and the pair decide to head back to Jen's house for a couple of steaks before engaging in a little bouncy. And while that's going on, we then cut to two sanitation workers who've been asked to do some investigative work in a nearby sewer system. One of the pair heads down only to come face to face with a colossal creature. He very quickly gets the old lights out falling down with the no breathing and the humana to the chest. His co-worker becomes impatient that this guy's been down there for so long and decides to head down there himself to see what the fuss is. But before he's even made it halfway down the ladder, the creature tries coming for him too, ultimately getting dragged down into the sewer to his demise. The next day, Ted and Jennifer are now seemingly working together, for some reason, when Lou drops by to update them on the murders, and in doing so he tries to subtly ask if Ted will come back to the force to help them figure out what exactly is going on. Ted flat out refuses, but does offer to be something of a sounding board if Lou needs to vent. Once again, the creature strikes, this time attacking a group of teens roller skating around a multi-storey car park, with the only survivor of the attacks being left in a state of sheer shock and rendered mute. Lou and the team begin to investigate the scene when Ted shows up out of the blue. He randomly kicks off at his old boss who tries to get him kicked out, and Lou has to take him to one side to calm him down and try and update him in a very coded way about what's happened here. Jennifer's also at the scene and says that she's heard from a lady called Sherry who's reluctant to talk to the cops but has information that might be beneficial to the case that she'll only share with people who'll give her a chance. Jen heads over to the rendezvous point to meet Sherry, but Sherry's late for the meeting. Jennifer wanders around the rendezvous spot and accidentally meets the creature who attacks her on sight. Ted gets a call from Lou informing her that Jennifer's in a coma at the hospital after having an epileptic seizure from what they think is related to a brain tumour. Ted races to the hospital only to have what Lou said confirmed and that Jennifer can't be seen at this time. Ted heads back to the office and immediately goes to hit the bottle, but Lou arrives just in time to talk him out of it. Around this time, Sherry makes it to the office and asks if Ted and Lou will hear her out. The pair are somewhat reluctant, but at this point they'll take anything if it helps to get the case back on track. Sherry explains that she was a college graduate who worked under a Dr. Amberdeen, a geneticist whose main project was an attempt to develop a new life form. And he succeeded, creating a dangerous creature that survived by drinking spinal fluid. The doctor was convinced that, should the creature reach maturity, it would pose a serious risk to human life. Unfortunately, he died of a heart attack before the creature could be killed, and the last documented notes on the creature are unclear as to its status. The reason that Sherry brings this up? Well, one of the side effects of the method with which the creature drains its victim's spinal fluid is that it can make the victim appear as though they've had an epileptic seizure or have symptoms in line with having a brain tumour. Ted and Lou can't quite believe what they're hearing, but they ask if Sherry knows of any way to kill the creature, and all she can tell them is that she has copies of all the notes made while working with Dr. Amberdeen back at her lab. In the meantime, Lou goes to confirm with the coroner if all the victims have low spinal fluid levels or symptoms in line with seizures or brain tumours, which they do. Armed with this information, they just need to figure out how the creature is able to move around the city undetected. But just as they're gearing up, news comes from the higher-ups saying that the case has been closed down, likely because they want to silence any public panic. Unswayed, Ted and Lou decide to investigate solo, and thus we enter our final act. As Sherry finds her notes and a creature in the process, will the gang manage to stop the Syngenor? Will Jennifer wake up from her coma? And when the gang find out that the Syngenor can reproduce asexually, will they manage to stop a wave of creatures from enveloping the LA streets? All this and more will be answered if you check out Scared to Death. And what a conflicting movie I've been given to talk about today. Frustrating is probably the best word to describe it, because I really want to like this thing, I really do. But it doesn't half go about doing things that really put a strain on my feelings towards it. Chief amongst the reasons is the script itself, which is just problematic. For starters, it's a script of two halves quality-wise, with the opening of the film being actually quite dry and repetitious. Basically, the first 30 to 50 minutes of this thing could best be described as Ted does some wisecracking with Jennifer or Lou, and occasionally we'll see the creature stalk and kill some woman, but without actually showing the kill on screen. It's neat enough when it's first established, but as it starts going through the motions again and again, it quickly becomes apparent that they're stalling for time, which left me impatiently clock-watching. But from around the time the roller skate murders happen, the film does pick up a bit, and in the second half, in my opinion, it gets enough momentum under its belt to deliver an interesting story that does have some nice twists and turns. I just wish they'd spread it out a bit more into the opening half. Equally, not helping matters are the massive plot holes and conveniences that this film has that either don't get resolved or are just forgotten about. Jennifer is set up as the main character for this film, but around 50 minutes in she gets attacked by the creature and disappears for the rest of the movie, only turning up at the very, very end of the film for a jump scare that did not win any favours with me. And we never actually get any kind of resolution for her. They just kind of go, oh, she woke up from a coma by the way, completely missing that the point of announcing that generally is for some kind of express purpose, even if it's just for a reunion with Ted. Instead, we get half the film with Jennifer and half the film with Sherry, and it's hard not to look at Sherry's involvement in the film and not think it was done out of convenience because the actress playing Jennifer either couldn't or didn't want to appear in the rest of the movie. Ted's connections to the police force are referenced heavily but never really followed up on. There's no resolution there, nor are there any resolutions on the police randomly deciding to close the case. The way it's inserted into the script kind of implies that the police are in on the Syngenor being a thing and that maybe they're having some involvement in its attacks. But no, they just say the police are closing the case and it never gets referenced or brought up again. Its ability to reproduce asexually also isn't really played out to its fullest potential either. They mention it's something that the Syngenor can do literal moments before they find a massive clutch of baby Syngenors, which they then promptly kill, and then that aspect of things doesn't really get brought up again. I know it's a standard trope of these kind of films, you know, the whole "you killed it but it had a baby" line is as old as the 40s or 50s in terms of sequel bait, but here, it's so half-hearted. They just really don't try to integrate it into the plot at all. Quite literally, they have one shot where they say it's a thing, one scene where they destroy a load of baby Syngenors, and then one POV shot implying there's more than one Syngenor at the end. And that's the whole involvement of that plot element. All within the last 10 to 15 minutes of the film, I might add. The film draws heavy inspiration from two, at the time, recent horror films, Halloween and Alien, and there are references to both littered throughout this thing, with some of them bordering on litigiously similar, such as the POV shots of the creature wandering around the suburbs peeking into windows, or shots of some of the victims being gooed up onto the wall as a source of food for the creature and its offspring. I mean, there's homaging and then there's flat out stealing, and this film quite regularly gets painfully close to crossing that line. Regular viewers will know my distaste for films that cite more mainstream features in their movies, and while nicking some of the scenarios and Cine here is a bit better than just flat out having the character say, "Oh, have you seen the movie Alien? Well, this creature's reminding me exactly of the alien from that movie with the alien called Alien," it's still not a great look. Pacing here is a little bit iffy too, with an opening half that's a super slow burner that drags on setting up its characters, scenarios and situations, before swapping to a near breakneck second half where we're thrown 1,000,001 pieces of exposition at once, and because there's no time to develop those ideas, it results in the inconsistencies and plot holes that I've mentioned previously. The 3-act structure isn't as solid as I'd like it to be. The first act is pretty hard defined, as is the third act, but placing where the second act begins and ends is somewhat tricky. There's no clear shift in tone, there's no moment where you can clearly see the film bed in. The second act of this film feels exactly the same as the first act of this film, just with a few more creature appearances. That's not good, because you need that clear distinction between your acts in order to subconsciously tell your audience where the film's up to. A good first act establishes the characters, introduces the core scenarios, and moves the characters into a position where that core scenario is going to impact them in some way. The second act then shows the characters engaging in that core scenario while developing their personalities and even potentially establishing a character arc. Unless your characters are Beavis and Butthead, it's important that your film gives your characters purpose and growth, so that by the end of the film they're in a different position to how they started. Usually either a significantly better or worse place, which is usually established in the third act, where our characters, having engaged in the situation, are then set up with a finale that resolves the situation or resolves their character arc, possibly teasing more in future if there's interest or scope to do so. This film's second act meanders as it doesn't know what to do with its core cast. It would have probably made more sense to introduce Sherry's thread earlier at the beginning of the second act rather than the end of it. In doing so, they could have set up the Syngenor a bit better without having to rush out all the crucial information in an exposition dump in the third act, and they could have slow-cooked that corrupt police angle a little bit more and possibly played them better into the third act, which would have tied more stuff off and led to a more satisfying resolution. Instead, they just kind of elongate the opening act, but quicker and a bit more violently. So we get 4 attacks instead of 2 and not a whole lot of plot development right up until the end of the act when Sherry finally becomes a key plot point, which leaves things a bit lumpy and uneven in my opinion. The dialogue dances a very fine line as well. In places, particularly with Ted's dialogue, it's charismatic, fluid and feels really solid. It kind of reminded me of the dialogue in The Stuff, in the sense that it's long, flowing, almost Woody Allen-esque monologues that are peppered with sarcasm. But outside of those occasional glimmers, what's here is rough. A lot of it is exposition dumps, and not very well handled exposition dumps at that. Most of the rest is stilted and fairly bland dialogue that fits the bill of B-movie horror perfectly well, but that, in many ways, is the problem. They clearly know how to write interesting dialogue because Ted and Lou's pieces are both fairly solid. I have no idea why they decided to put so little interest into the rest of the cast's pieces. It's baffling, honestly. The script was co-written and directed by William Malone. He has 18 directing credits and 6 writing credits in a career spanning 29 years. Highlights include TV contributions towards Tales from the Crypt and the 1999 remake of House on Haunted Hill, with his best known writing credit likely to be Universal Soldier: The Return. His last credit was in 2008 and he hasn't been seen since. Also on co-writing duties we have Robert Short. He has 5 writing credits. This was his first, and I'd say probably his best known of the 5, with his last in 2002. He's mainly known for work in visual effects, of which he has 23 credits, with highlights including Star Trek the Motion Picture and the reboot movie of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. And on the direction front, well, there honestly isn't a lot to say. Generally, when judging a film's direction, you're looking both at how the director was able to manage the production in order to deliver a coherent product, and for bonus points, how the director was able to produce a work that leaves their mark on the picture. An identifier that says, this is a work of this director specifically. What we have here from a direction standpoint, however, is a film that's predominantly lifting shot types and scenes from Alien and Halloween. And what's left outside of that is, at best, acceptable if not a touch bland. I can understand why the direction here is played so safe. Malone sold his entire life effectively to get the movie made, and he specifically chose to make a horror movie because he knew it was a fairly safe bet and that you could generally make something that looked good with a very little budget. That, coupled with the fact that he had previous work in producing Halloween masks for a company, meant that he could keep costs low on getting the main horror costume produced because he could just make it himself. The guy put a lot on the line and wanted a safe return, so it's understandable that the direction here would predominantly be cribbed from successful films of the last 2 to 5 years and whatever looked about right to put the key messages of the film across. I get that. But it doesn't ultimately lead to an end product that I can really praise. It's effectively cheating off someone else's homework. And while that's fine if you don't get caught, if you do, it's problematic. So in terms of creating a distinct vision, it's a big thumbs down from me. Direction of the cast does fare a bit better. The cast are responsive, move around their set spaces decently enough, and utilise props effectively. But there are plenty of points in this thing where it feels less like the director wanted to show the best of the cast on screen, and more like they just wanted the take, which is understandable but not great viewing. The results are about as interesting as you could imagine, which, again, does nothing to help really sell the film to audiences and leaves things rather lifeless for large chunks of the runtime, unfortunately. What I can say is that the Cine is probably the best part of this film. Yes, a lot of shots are stolen from other movies, but the composition in those shots can't be faulted. In places, the lighting and use of chiaroscuro is phenomenal for the budget. Honestly, given the money they were working with, I'm amazed the thing looks half as good as it does, and the only negative criticism I have about the movie is the flat profile some shots work with during the longer exposition scenes. It would have been nicer to either add a little more to the depth of field in those shots, or to have used more cuts to help at least make them a bit more engaging to the audience. The only other thing I picked up on is an age-old problem of movies from this era, and that's that quite a few of the night shots are massively underexposed, meaning we as an audience are effectively drenched in darkness with no idea what we're actually supposed to be looking at. There's a blatant example of this at the beginning of the film, but as it goes on and the lighting gets more visually interesting, it does pop up from time to time as a bit of a problem, as the dimly lit sewer sets become increasingly frustrating to make out. Performance-wise, there are 2 stars of this thing really, and that's John Stinson as Ted and David Moses as Lou. The pair are constantly charismatic, have some of the best lines in the film, and are always trying to keep animated and high energy throughout the production. They have phenomenal chemistry together and are probably the second best thing about this film outside of the Cine. Positively solid performances and totally memorable throughout. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for the rest of the cast. Tony Giannotta and Diana Davidson try amicably to match the energy of their on-screen counterparts as Jennifer and Sherry respectively, but neither get enough time to fully bed into their roles before they're pulled away from us. They're notable, just. The rest of the supporting cast drop below even that and are just so bland. Don't even get me started. They're cookie cutter extras who are there to look a bit scared, do their screamy bit, and maybe talk to the main cast for a couple of lines. They're totally unremarkable for this genre, and it's a real shame, as it's stuff like that that can help lift a mediocre film into a great one. And finally, the soundtrack, which is actually surprisingly solid as well. It's an experimentally synthy piece that suits the tone of the film perfectly. It sets the tone and mood, which results in even some of the more inane shots being given just a bit more of a sinister edge. It's a good, solid work that stands out, which is odd given the film's dedication to conformity within the genre. And one that, while I wouldn't want to listen to in isolation, I absolutely enjoyed as part of this film. Scared to Death was released in 1980, and Malone's first distribution sale not only managed to pay off the costs of the film, but netted him a tidy profit, when he agreed a play deal with Malaysia for 90 grand. It struggled initially to find distribution in the States before the rights eventually landed with Lone Star Pictures, who distributed the movie to most drive-ins across the US, something Malone was unaware of when he attended the premiere in Texas expecting a proper theatrical experience, and effectively arrived in a backlot wearing a tuxedo. It would arrive on UK shores in 1981 and was passed uncut in May of that year, later receiving a VHS release by Avatar in late 1981. Unaffected by the 1984 Video Recordings Act, it remained in circulation until it finally received a DVD release also by Avatar in 2002, which is the copy that I've used. It's rough on picture quality and the sound quality is up and down as well, sounding very hissy and tinny. The only extras to speak of are a trailer and an interactive menu with scene select, so it's quite the budget release. Luckily, in 2022, Vinegar Syndrome re-released the film with a ground-up remaster on Blu-ray, and it looks delightful, fixing almost all of the picture and sound quality issues with the previous release. While it isn't perfect, it's the best this film's likely to look, and it has a making of, location tour, and a new cut of the film that supposedly tightens it up a bit more alongside a couple of other extras to help sweeten the deal, which works for me. I think, had I paid the $30 plus it would have cost to import the Vinegar Syndrome version of this film over to the UK, I'd have probably been a bit harsher on it. At that price point, I'd have considered myself robbed for this film. But the version I ended up picking up cost me £3, and for that, I feel a lot nicer about it. It's far from perfect, with an opening that was slow burn, decent Cinean direction that's been screwed over by a dry and repetitive script, and a second half that finally allowed the script to come into its own, but left the direction and Cine high and dry after such a promising opening. Nice lighting, some decent performances, and a good soundtrack helped to just about get this movie over the line in my opinion, but ultimately this was a feature that I could have taken or left. I'm more than curious to see what the new director's cut offers in terms of tightening the film up a bit, but it'll be a while before I go back to this one to check it out. I'm not going to say avoid this one, but I wouldn't say it was a priority watch.